For English learners, this story offers a rich opportunity to practice language skills. By reading the emotional journey of Emily and Daniel, learners can improve their vocabulary, understand conversational English, and engage with themes such as personal growth, self-discovery, and relationships. Through this story, you'll not only learn English, but also see how the language is used to express emotions, build connections, and navigate difficult situations. My name is Emily. I am 22 years old. I have short brown hair and brown eyes. I live in a small town with my family. I love reading books, playing music, and walking in the park. The park is my favorite place in the town. It is very quiet and peaceful there. Sometimes I go to the park to think, to read, or just to relax. One sunny afternoon in May, I decided to take a walk in the park. The weather was perfect. The sky was clear, and there was a light breeze that made the trees move gently. I took my book with me because I wanted to read. I love reading books, especially books about adventure, love, and dreams. My dream is to travel around the world one day, but for now, I'm happy to read stories and imagine that I am the main character. When I arrived at the park, I walked to my favorite bench. It was a wooden bench near a small pond. There were ducks swimming in the pond, and the sound of the water was very calming. I sat down, opened my book, and started to read. The words on the page made me forget about everything around me. I was so lost in the book that I didn't see him at first. I heard footsteps behind me, soft and slow. I turned my head slightly and saw a man walking past. He was tall, with dark brown hair, and he looked very confident. He wore a light blue shirt, dark jeans, and brown shoes. He looked like a man who worked in an office, but there was something special about him. He had a calm and kind look in his eyes. I felt a little nervous, but I quickly turned back to my book. But then he stopped. I was surprised when he stopped near me. He didn't sit down, but he looked at me for a moment. Then he smiled. "Hello?" he said softly. His voice was calm and friendly. I looked up at him, and for a second, I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to strangers talking to me. "Hi," I answered shyly. I smiled and looked down at my book, feeling embarrassed. "Are you reading something interesting?" he asked. His voice was warm, and I could hear that he was trying to be kind. I looked up at him again. "Yes, it's a book about love and adventure," I said. I felt a little nervous, but something about him made me feel comfortable. "That sounds nice," he said. "I love books like that too." I smiled. "Really? What kind of books do you like?" I asked, trying to make the conversation flow. He sat down next to me on the bench, which surprised me. We were strangers, but he didn't seem to mind. He looked comfortable. "I like books about history," he said, "and sometimes I read adventure books too. I love to read about different times and places." I nodded, understanding. "That's interesting. I've never read many history books, but I think they are important." He smiled again. His smile was kind and warm, and it made me feel like I had known him for a long time. We talked for a few minutes about books. I liked hearing about his favorite books, and he liked hearing about mine. I told him about a book I had read about a woman who traveled the world looking for new adventures. It was one of my favorites, and I couldn't stop talking about it. "Wow, that sounds amazing," he said. "I would love to travel like that one day, but I think it's hard. Life is busy." I nodded. "Yes, life is busy, but I still dream about it. Maybe one day." There was a short silence as we both thought about our dreams. The sound of the ducks in the pond filled the silence. It was peaceful. The man looked at me and said, "My name is Daniel. What's yours?" "Emily," I said. "Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you, Emily." Daniel said, his smile still warm. How old are you? I'm 22, I said. How old are you? Daniel paused for a moment, looking thoughtful. I'm 32, he said, still smiling. I know, I'm a little older than you. I was surprised. 10 years older. That was a big difference. I didn't know how to feel about it. I thought for a second, and then I smiled. That's okay, I said. Age is just a number, right? Daniel laughed, and I felt happy. His laugh was deep and soft. It made me feel at ease. You're right, he said. Age doesn't matter if you enjoy talking to someone. I smiled and nodded. We continued talking about many things. We talked about movies we liked, our favorite foods, and what we did on the weekends. He told me that he worked in a big office in the city. He worked with computers and technology. He said he didn't mind his job, but sometimes it was stressful. I like to come to the park to relax, Daniel said. It helps me forget about work for a while. I nodded. I feel the same way. The park is a good place to think. And it's quiet. We sat there for what felt like a long time, just talking. I didn't want the conversation to end. I had never felt so comfortable talking to a stranger before. Daniel was kind, and he made me feel like I was important. It was an unusual feeling. I had met many people in my life, but Daniel was different. I couldn't explain it. After a while, Daniel stood up. I need to go now, but it was really nice talking to you, Emily, he said. I stood up too. It was nice talking to you too, I said, smiling. Maybe we can talk again sometime? I come to the park every day, Daniel said. I'll be here tomorrow too. Maybe we can talk again then. I felt happy. I come here every day too, I said. I'll see you tomorrow. Daniel smiled again. I'm looking forward to it. With that, he waved and started walking away. I watched him walk for a moment before I turned and started walking in the opposite direction. But as I walked, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Daniel was 10 years older than me. That's a big difference, I thought. But I didn't feel uncomfortable. I didn't know why, but something about him made me feel safe. I liked talking to him. I liked his smile. I arrived home soon after that. As I opened the door, my mother smiled at me. How was the park today, Emily? It was nice, I said, still thinking about Daniel. I met a man there. His name is Daniel. He's 10 years older than me. We talked for a long time. Oh? My mother said, looking a little curious. What did you talk about? We talked about books and travel and dreams, I said. I smiled. He's very nice. I think I'll see him again tomorrow. My mother nodded, smiling too. That sounds nice, honey. I hope you have a good time. I didn't tell my mother everything I was feeling. I didn't tell her that I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. I didn't tell her that something in my heart was telling me that this meeting was special. But I felt it. I felt that I wanted to know him better. I wanted to talk to him more. As I went to bed that night, I thought about the conversation. I thought about his smile, his voice, and the way he looked at me. I felt excited. I didn't know what the future held, but I hoped that I would see him again. Tomorrow, I would go to the park, and maybe Daniel would be there. The next day, I woke up early feeling excited. I didn't know why I felt this way, but something about yesterday's conversation with Daniel stayed in my mind. I kept thinking about his smile, the way he looked at me when he spoke, and how easy it was to talk to him. I went about my usual morning routine. I made breakfast, did my chores, and prepared myself for the day. But my thoughts kept drifting back to Daniel. It felt strange. It was just one meeting, just one conversation, but it felt important. After I finished my lunch, I decided to go to the park again. I usually go to the park every afternoon. It's my escape, my time to relax. But today I had a feeling that something might happen. I wasn't sure what, but I hoped it would be something good. When I arrived at the park, the sun was shining brightly in the sky. There were a few people walking around, but it was still quiet. I smiled as I walked to the same bench by the pond. I was looking forward to reading my book, but I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with Daniel. I sat down on the bench and opened my book, but it was hard to focus. My eyes kept looking around, hoping to see him. I wasn't sure if he would be here today. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he wouldn't come, but deep down I hoped I would see him again. And then I saw him. Daniel was walking toward me, slowly, just like yesterday. He was wearing a dark blue jacket today, with jeans and sneakers. He looked casual, but still very put together. I smiled as soon as I saw him, and he smiled back when he saw me. "Hi, Emily," he said, his voice as friendly as before. "I didn't expect to see you here so early." I smiled shyly. I usually come in the afternoon, but today I came a little earlier, I said. "How about you? Are you always here at this time?" "Yes," Daniel replied, sitting next to me. "I come here every day. It's a good place to relax. I like being around nature." We started talking again, just like yesterday. The conversation flowed easily between us. We talked about books, about the weather, and about life. It felt so natural, so comfortable. I couldn't believe how easy it was to talk to him. It felt like we had known each other for a long time, even though we had only met once. Daniel told me more about his job. He worked as a project manager for a technology company in the city. He explained how his job was both interesting and stressful. "I have to make sure everything goes well with the projects," he said. "Sometimes it's hard, but coming here helps me clear my mind." I nodded. "I understand. I can't imagine how stressful that must be." "Yes," Daniel said with a smile, "but it's good work. It pays well, and I enjoy it most of the time. What about you, Emily? What do you do?" I felt a little embarrassed. I didn't have a job yet. I was still figuring out what I wanted to do. "Well, I'm still figuring it out," I said. "I just finished college and I'm looking for work. I'm thinking about doing something with my love for books and writing." Daniel looked at me with interest. "That sounds amazing. I think you would be great at that. You're a good storyteller. I can tell by the way you talk about books." I blushed a little, not expecting such a compliment. "Thank you," I said, feeling happy. "I really hope I can find something soon." We continued to talk for a while longer. Every time Daniel spoke, I felt more and more comfortable. He was easy to talk to, and he was kind and patient. There was something about him that made me feel like I could trust him, even though we had just met. It was a strange feeling, but it was a good one. After some time, Daniel stood up again. "I'm going to take a walk around the park," he said. "Would you like to join me?" I looked at him, surprised. "A walk? Sure, I'd like that." We both started walking slowly along the path in the park. The trees were tall and green, and the air smelled fresh. It was a beautiful afternoon. As we walked, we talked more about our lives. Daniel told me about his childhood, how he grew up in a small town like mine, and how he moved to the city for work. I told him more about my family and how much I loved reading. I explained that my dream was to become a writer, but I was still figuring out how to make it happen. "It's hard," I said. "I don't know where to start." Daniel smiled at me. "You don't have to have everything figured out right now. Life is about learning and growing. You'll find your way." I smiled back at him. His words were comforting, and I felt encouraged. "Thanks, Daniel. I hope you're right." We continued walking for a while, just enjoying each other's company. We didn't have to say much to understand each other. It was like we were connected in some way, even though we didn't know each other very well yet. Eventually, we reached a small bridge that crossed over a little stream. The sun was starting to set, casting a golden light on the water. We stood there for a moment, looking at the view. "Wow," Daniel said. "This is beautiful." "It is," I agreed. "I come here often, but I never get tired of it." "Maybe we can come back here together sometime," Daniel said, his voice soft. I looked at him, surprised. "You mean, like, on a date?" He smiled, his eyes twinkling. "Yes, if you'd like. I think it would be nice." I felt my heart race a little. A date? I hadn't thought about it that way, but now that he said it, the idea seemed wonderful. I smiled. I'd like that. We stood there for a few more moments, just enjoying the peace of the park. The birds were quiet now, and the sky was turning a soft shade of pink. It felt like a perfect moment. Finally, Daniel said, "I should go. I have to get back to work tomorrow, but I'll be here again tomorrow, if you want to meet again." I felt a little sad that he was leaving, but I smiled. "I'll be here," I said. "I'd love to see you again." With that, we said goodbye, and Daniel walked away. I watched him leave, feeling a mix of emotions. I was happy, excited, and a little nervous. I had just met him, but it felt like I had known him for a long time. He was kind, thoughtful, and easy to talk to. And now he had asked me to meet him again. That made me feel special. As I walked back home, I couldn't stop thinking about him, the way he smiled, the way he listened to me, and the way he made me feel. It was all so new and exciting. Maybe this was the beginning of something special. Maybe I was starting to feel something more for Daniel. But there was one thing that I couldn't stop thinking about. He was 10 years older than me. That was a big difference. Could it work between us? I wasn't sure, but I wanted to find out. Days passed quickly after my second meeting with Daniel. We had met in the park several times since that afternoon. Each time I looked forward to seeing him. I didn't know why, but something about him made me feel at ease, like I could be myself completely. We continued to talk about our lives, our dreams, and our pasts. We spent hours walking through the park, sitting by the pond, or just talking on the bench. One evening, after spending another peaceful afternoon with Daniel, I walked home slowly, feeling a little confused. My heart was full of happiness, but my mind was full of questions. Was this real? Was I falling for him? I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every moment we spent together felt special, but there was one thing I couldn't ignore: the age difference. Daniel was 32. I was 22. That was 10 years. It wasn't a huge gap, but it was enough to make me feel uncertain. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about how different our lives were. Daniel had lived in the city for many years. He had a stable job, a career he was proud of, and experiences that made him wise. He had seen the world, done things that I could only imagine. I, on the other hand, was just beginning to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I had just finished college and hadn't yet started my career. I rolled over in bed, staring at the ceiling. Could I keep up with him? I was still young, still finding myself. Could he see me as someone who could be his equal? Could he see me as a woman, not just a girl? And then there was the question I kept avoiding. Would our age difference ever become a problem? The next morning, I woke up early, my thoughts still swirling. I went to the park, like I usually did, hoping I would see Daniel. I didn't want to worry about the future. I just wanted to enjoy the time we had together. When I arrived, I saw him sitting on our usual bench. He looked up as I walked toward him, and his face broke into a smile. I smiled back, my heart racing in my chest. "Hi, Emily," he said, standing up to greet me. "How are you today?" "I'm good. Just thinking about things," I said, sitting down next to him. My heart was still beating fast, but I tried to calm myself. Daniel looked at me with a gentle smile. "What things?" he asked, his voice soft and curious. I hesitated. I wanted to tell him everything, my worries, my fears, my doubts, but I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I was ready. So instead I said, "Just life, I guess. Figuring things out." He nodded as if he understood. "I know what you mean. Life can be confusing sometimes, but it's also exciting, don't you think?" I smiled. "Yeah, it's exciting. I just wish I knew what I was doing sometimes." Daniel laughed, and I felt a little better. You don't have to know everything. It takes time, and sometimes the best things happen when you don't plan them. I nodded, but my mind was still elsewhere. I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said, but my worries didn't disappear. Instead, I found myself thinking even more about our age difference. As we continued talking, I realized that the more I got to know Daniel, the more I liked him. His confidence, his kindness, his wisdom, all of it drew me in. But there was still a part of me that wondered if we were really a good match. Could a 22-year-old and a 32-year-old really have a future together? Later that afternoon, after our walk around the park, Daniel asked me to meet him for dinner. I was nervous but excited. I didn't know what to expect. Was this a date? Was it just another casual meeting? I wasn't sure, but I knew I wanted to see him again. We met at a small, cozy restaurant downtown. It was a quiet place with dim lighting and a relaxed atmosphere. We sat at a table near the window, and I couldn't help but notice how handsome Daniel looked in the soft light. He was wearing a navy blue sweater and dark jeans, and his smile was as warm as always. "Thanks for coming," he said as we sat down. "I thought we could try something different today." I smiled nervously. "Of course, I'm glad to be here." The waiter came and took our order, and we started talking, just like we always did. The conversation was easy, and we laughed together, talking about everything from childhood memories to travel plans. But as the evening wore on, I began to feel the weight of my thoughts again. I liked Daniel. I really did. But the age difference kept coming back to me. What did he want from me? Was this just something fun for him? A little fling with a younger woman? Or did he really see something serious between us? I didn't know, and I was afraid to ask. At some point during dinner, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I needed to ask the question that had been bothering me for days. "Daniel," I said softly, looking at him across the table, "can I ask you something?" He looked at me, a little surprised, but nodded. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. This was harder than I thought it would be. "I've been thinking about us and about our age difference. I don't want to make it a big deal, but I don't know what it means. I don't know if it's something that could ever be a problem." Daniel looked at me carefully, his expression thoughtful. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just studied my face, as if he was trying to understand me completely. "Emily," he said slowly, "I understand why you might be worried. 10 years is a big difference. I get it. But I'm not thinking about your age. I'm thinking about who you are as a person. You're smart, funny, kind, and you make me feel alive in a way that I haven't felt in a long time." I felt my heart beat faster. His words were unexpected, and they made me feel a wave of warmth and hope. "Do you think our age difference will be a problem?" I asked, my voice shaky. Daniel smiled gently. "I don't know what the future holds, Emily, but I do know that right now I like being with you. I enjoy our time together, and I don't want that to stop." I felt a little better after hearing him say that, but there were still so many questions in my mind. What if things changed? What if one day our age difference did matter? What if he wanted something more serious, and I wasn't ready for it? But I didn't ask him those questions. I didn't want to ruin the moment. Instead, I smiled and said, "I like being with you too, Daniel. I'm just scared." Daniel reached across the table and took my hand gently. "It's okay to be scared," he said softly. "We don't have to rush anything. We can take it one step at a time, but I promise you, I'm not going anywhere." His words made me feel better. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was with someone who understood me, someone who was patient with my fears and doubts. As the night went on, I felt more relaxed. We finished our dinner, and Daniel paid the bill. We walked outside into the cool evening air, and he walked me home, just like he always did. It felt natural, like this was how it was supposed to be. But in the back of my mind, I still had doubts. I liked Daniel a lot, and I wanted to see where this would go, but I couldn't stop asking myself if our age difference would be something that could break us apart in the future. As we reached my doorstep, Daniel turned to me and said, "I'll see you tomorrow, Emily." I nodded, smiling. "I'll be here." He leaned down and kissed my cheek gently. "Good night, Emily. I'm really glad I met you." I felt my cheeks flush, but I smiled. "Good night, Daniel." "Me too." I watched him walk away, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel so uncertain. Maybe things wouldn't be easy. Maybe we would face challenges. But right now, all I cared about was the present. And in the present, I was happy. I was with Daniel, and that was enough for me. The days that followed were filled with a quiet kind of happiness. Every time I saw Daniel, I felt my heart flutter. We continued to meet at the park, walked together, had long conversations over coffee, and shared moments that made me feel like I was in a dream. It was easy to be with him, easy to laugh with him, easy to just be. But with each passing day, the feeling that something more was happening between us grew stronger. It wasn't just friendship anymore. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, the way he listened to me, the way we seemed to understand each other without needing many words. Yet, despite the happiness I felt when I was with him, there were still moments of doubt. Am I really ready for this? The questions in my mind never went away. The age gap was always there, lurking in the background. Daniel was 32, and I was only 22. The difference was still something I couldn't ignore. And every time I let myself fall deeper for him, that nagging voice in my head would remind me, what happens when the difference becomes too much? Sometimes I wondered if I was just imagining things, a romantic fantasy built on nothing more than a shared interest and a few moments of closeness. What would happen when the excitement wore off? Would he still want to be with someone so much younger? Would I still feel the same about him after a few months or years? I tried not to think about it, but it was hard. One afternoon, after another long walk around the park, Daniel and I sat by the pond, our usual spot. It was a warm, sunny day, and the sound of the water flowing over the rocks was calming. I could feel the peace of the park, but the peace in my heart was harder to find. Daniel turned to me, his expression serious. "Emily," he said softly, "I need to talk to you about something." I looked at him, my heart suddenly skipping a beat. Was he going to say something that would change everything? Was this the moment when he'd finally tell me that he didn't think we could work because of our age difference? My mind raced, but I kept my face calm. "What's going on?" I asked quietly. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about how we've been spending time together, and about where we're headed. I know things have been moving quickly, but I want you to know that I'm not rushing you. I care about you, Emily. A lot. I think about you all the time." I felt my heart flutter in my chest. This was it. This was the moment. I didn't know what he was going to say, but I had to listen. I had to understand what he meant. "I care about you too," I said, trying to steady my voice. "But Daniel, I've been thinking about something. About us. About our age difference. I don't want to make it a problem, but it's hard not to think about it. It feels like it could become an issue." Daniel reached out and gently took my hand, his thumb brushing over my skin. His touch was warm and reassuring, and somehow it made me feel like everything would be okay. "I understand your worries," he said, his voice steady. "I've been thinking about it too, and I know that our age difference is something we can't ignore. But at the same time, I don't want it to define us. I don't want it to be a barrier." I looked at him, my heart aching with a mix of hope and fear. But what if it is a barrier? What if one day you realize that you want something different, something more grown up, something that someone older could give you? Daniel looked at me with intensity in his eyes. "Emily, I've lived my life. I've had my experiences, but that doesn't mean I'm done with everything. I don't want to live in the past. I want to experience the future with you, whatever that looks like. I don't see you as someone who's just a young girl who's still figuring things out. I see you as someone who is smart, ambitious, and capable of great things. And I want to be a part of that." I felt a surge of emotion fill my chest, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. His words were exactly what I needed to hear, but they also made me feel vulnerable. He wasn't just talking about the present, he was talking about the future. He saw a future with me. "I want to be with you, Daniel," I said softly, "but I'm scared. I'm scared that I'm not ready for this, or that we'll get to a point where we'll want different things." Daniel squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with understanding. "I know you're scared, and that's okay. I'm scared too, but we can't let fear stop us from finding out what we have together. We have to take the risk, Emily. We can't know what the future holds, but we can start by being honest with each other, and by taking it one step at a time." His words made sense, but I was still nervous. But what if one day we wake up and realize that we want different things? Daniel smiled at me gently. "Then we'll figure it out together. But let's not worry about that yet. Right now, we're here, and that's enough." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words. Maybe he was right. Maybe I needed to stop overthinking everything. We couldn't predict the future, but we could control how we acted in the present. And right now, I wanted to be with him. I wanted to see where this relationship could take us, even if it was uncertain. "Okay," I said, smiling through the nervousness. "Let's take it one step at a time." Daniel smiled back, his face softening. "That's all I'm asking for, one step at a time." The conversation left me feeling lighter, but still full of questions. I had always been someone who liked certainty, but in love, there was no guarantee, no clear path to follow. The future was always a mystery. For the next few weeks, we continued to spend time together, enjoying each other's company more than ever. The more time I spent with Daniel, the more I realized that our age difference didn't matter as much as I had feared. It wasn't about the years between us, it was about the way we made each other feel. We had a connection that went beyond age, but there were still moments when doubt crept into my mind. Could we really make this work long term? One day, while we were walking through the park, I found myself asking him something I hadn't asked before. "Daniel," I began, "do you see us having a future together? Do you think this could really work?" Daniel stopped walking and turned to face me, his expression serious but soft. "I don't know what the future holds, Emily," he said, "but I do know this. I want to try. I want to see where this goes. With you." His words made my heart skip a beat. There it was, the honesty I'd been looking for. He wasn't promising that everything would be perfect, but he was willing to try, and that meant everything to me. I smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and hope. I want to try too. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, the world around us fading away. I realized that the uncertainty, the vulnerability, the excitement was what love was all about. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real. And right now, that was enough.